Okay, it's that time again. It's chilly out. You might hear the hissing of the gas heater and things in the background. We apologize. We had to relocate a little bit tonight because of the cold weather. Inside here in beautiful Panama City Beach overlooking St. Andrews Bay, where one day we'll show you a daytime broadcast, the birds swooping down. It's a beautiful place. And tonight on the program, it's that Wednesday night group again, Sweet and Sour. That means, of course, Allie will be here shortly. She'll be a little late tonight, checking in. Allie Peak Wilbur, and then our buddy David Moulton. You can guess which one's sweet, which one's sour. Plus, we have a comment from Urban Meyer about the death of a famous Gator football player. At one time, famous because he was the number one ranked recruit in the country. And we'll hear from Urban on that, although we had a little sound issues. And I'll tell you what happened to me today. I got ripped off of every one of my possessions as a writer by a company that I'm really mad about. All that coming your way, plus a lot more. If you can bear up tonight, hope you're warm, come join us. Give us your 2 cents worth on life and on Gator football, which is the same to most of us. And we'll spend the next hour together, staying warm. I hope you are. Stand by.
Yes, it's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking. But be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye.
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Good evening and stay warm. We're trying to here. We've relocated part of our studio, which is not really a studio. It's a living room, as you can see, here on our condo here, right above St. Andrews Bay, beautiful Panama City. We'll be here a lot over the next year. Had a guy last night say to me, "All these years, buddy, all these years, I've been listening to your show. I did not know you broadcast from Panama City." Well, we didn't, just so you know. We didn't, and I came here right before Christmas to be with my fiancée, Dawn, and we'll be married on Saturday right here in Panama City by her son, Tyler. And we upstate a little bit, and we'll tell you about that if you'd like to know. And meanwhile, it's on with life, a new way, a new thing. And, here's a question before we start. We're waiting on Allie. It'll be a little bit late, and we also got a bite from Urban, talking about Ronald Powell. We interviewed Urban this morning. That show is scheduled to run tomorrow night. The audio on it is a little bit weak, and I apologize for that. But again, we're not in a super studio here. We're just in a living room doing this. But there's be things to talk about there. We talked about this guy was the number one recruit in all the country, and Florida got him. And what happened? And he passed away just the other day, and no one knows why. It's a mystery. So, as we say good evening to our audience tonight, first to check in tonight, Tommy Seal. All right, Tommy, good job. You get the early word award tonight for coming in first. And then Animal, hello to you. Come join us if you can. We'd love to hear from you, and you'll be getting treated to 2 of the best sports talk people in the business, and Allie Peak Wilbur and David Moulton. I want to say this, set it up before I go. And if you ever stop and thought about your most valuable possessions that aren't necessarily worth a lot of money, but are things that you would go and retrieve if there was a fire in the house, what they meant to you, what would define yours? If you had things that you worked on your entire life, I don't care if you're a wood carver or a painter or whatever you are, and you had them all in one place, they were safe, and it wasn't a case of anybody of being destroyed, but if one day they disappeared on you, and someone ripped you off, and you can't do anything about it. Well, it happened to me. I'll tell you the story tonight. I won't dwell on it. I had all of my newspaper clippings, a lifetime of clippings for 60 years, not every single one, but all my most valuable ones and ones I thought were most memorable in a public storage unit. And I have had them in there for 12, 15 years. And and they've been in boxes, and they've been lasting pretty nicely, and we've been paying for it every month. And one day the goal was to take some of the better ones, if we can find that many, 20 or 25, and put them in a book. And these are stories from, places like Cocoa, Florida, St. Pete, Florida, New York, Westchester County, Denver, etc. The many papers I've worked at. And some of them are very special. As you know, newsprint doesn't last long these days, and most newspapers don't even have a library of their clippings. They're gone. And you can very rarely get a hold of a favorite clipping anymore. I had about 500 or 600 of them in a box in this place in Ocala, Public Storage Company. And I'm not going to say it wasn't actually my fault at all, but I claim ignorance, perhaps, because in the process, and not getting morbid or blaming anybody or anything on this thing, that these clippings were there, and my late wife took care of them, and we paid the bill, and it's under her name. And when she passed away last June, we were unable to connect with the storage company, but they did send us a notification. We tried to get back in touch with them. We called, left a message. We could never connect. I wanted to pay the bill, get a bigger unit, etc. And I had a friend who was looking in on it for me. And these clippings were in there. And in fact, my daughter came down from Pennsylvania just the other day to work on all this belongings. There were other things like video and stuff in there that were valuable to me. And she got a notification yesterday that they had taken away. They put a lien on the storage unit. I had no way of knowing that because all the communications went to my former wife, deceased wife's documentation, her phone, her email. I knew a bill was paid out of a credit card. I didn't know exactly. Probably should have looked into it. And then I thought that's the kind of thing didn't happen for a year or two. Well, guess what? It happened. They took every single one of my newspaper clippings yesterday, and it was devastating. But I'm kind of past it now, moving on, and we'll do that. And the one thing about I want to say is I got an email today from my friend, New York Times editor, sports editor, was Neil Amder. And he said to me, well, guess what? You may not be here, but your name is still around. Your name was in today, a quote from one of your stories in the New York Times obituary of former Giants columnist Norm Snead, quarterback Norm Snead. And he sent it to me, and it says, quote, it says, Snead has this image as a loser, the newspaper columnist Buddy Martin wrote after the trade. Snead talked to Martin about the troubles he had encountered the previous season. Many nights I'd come home and say, I think I've got it, he said. Then I'd go out the next day and start changing things, trying to find some kind of magic. I became a worse football player for it, and I hurt my team. That's the story I wrote about Norm Snead back in 1973 for the Sporting News. And there's at least one clipping out there with my name on it, even if I haven't got the others. Anyway, my misfortune. If you've got something you really value, look into it. I hope I'm going to be able to do something about this. Probably not, but just think about it. What is the thing that you like the most, that you cherish, besides pictures of your kids and your parents, etc.? Okay? Think about that. All right, we talked to Urban Meyer today, and he gave us some information about a lot of things, and the audio is kind of weak on this, but we wanted to get his take on this former player mysteriously a couple of days ago. Nobody seems to know why. And so we'll share that bite with you and a commercial, and then we'll have Allie on the other side on this chilly Wednesday night. Got my nights. The Buddy Martin Show is on the air 4 and sometimes 5 nights, and as of next week, we'll be off a few days. We'll be on a honeymoon. That's what they call it, yeah. And so we'll be back with you soon. But thanks for listening and supporting this program. We've really amassed a nice group of people here listening and watching this show on YouTube. We thank you. And don't forget, while you're there, go down and subscribe. Hit the subscribe button and like the show, and that helps us a lot. Meanwhile, here's our commercial from our friends at Moulton Law, and followed by the Urban Meyer interview on Ronald Powell. Jeffrey Meldon. Jeffrey, you do a show where you ask a lot of questions. I've got one for you right now, okay, regarding how do you know whether your case is being handled right and what to do about it. In medicine, you can get a second opinion if you're not satisfied with the doctor's opinion that they have. And do you have that in law? Can you do that with lawyers?
Yeah, buddy. As a matter of fact, we get quite a few calls from folks that have signed up, particularly with the big box law firms, that they do a hell of a good job of putting ads on TV, but after that, they don't really measure up to the way we try to create a client experience that's outstanding. And we're always willing to review a case and give a second opinion, just like with a doctor, because not all law firms are created equal.
I guess that's the normal thing. Just go to Meldon Law, Google it, and find out, and just give them a call. And like you say, if you come in, you get to see a Meldon. You don't get shuffled off to somebody else. You get to see a Meldon, and that's good to know, because a lot of people don't know how to do that stuff, like me. And maybe you can coach us through. So Meldon Law, they won't back down. They will take your questions about your case if you have a question.
Yes, whether it's a new case or an existing case, give us a call. We'd be glad to go over it with you. There's no charge to review your case with you. And a lot of times it makes good sense just to get a second opinion.
Good stuff from Meldon Law. They don't back down, but they will give you a second opinion. All right, thanks very much, Jeffrey. Folks, again, bear with us tonight. We're going through a few issues technical. It's been a cold day, really cold here at night. We have our gas heater on. It makes a hissing sound, and sometimes that carries over into the microphone. I apologize for that, and hopefully we'll get through it if you folks are hanging there with me. If you're having issues, can't hear or see, write me a note. Tell me. Maybe we can work on it, see what's going on. But right now, we're going to go to our bite with Urban Meyer. Urban's going to be on tomorrow night if we can resolve the sound issues and get his take on a lot of things. And he talked today about a former player of his. It was very special to him. He passed away a couple of days ago. And here's Urban Meyer talking about Ronald Powell. Let's talk sadly about somebody that we got some bad news about this week. We talk about recruiting players, by the way, and you raised it to an art form. I mean, no one's ever recruited like that in Florida and never will. The number 1, 2, and 3 classes you got over a period of time, incredible. But not without some cost on you. Took a toll. You would recruit players 2 and 3 years sometimes to get them. One player that when Florida got it was a big news story, Ronald Powell. May he rest in peace. He was the number 1 player in the country to prospect. If you could share with us, and he had his ups and downs, obviously, share with us a little bit about Ronald Powell, how you recruited him, how he became a Gator, and the issues that he faced.
Yeah, heartbreaking. A couple former players reached out to me and shared me the information about Ron passing away, and it blows your mind. I mean, a young, healthy, great-looking young guy that we recruited out of California. I was actually opposed to going to California just because it's so far away from home, and if there are issues. But when you run into, I think with Josh Shaw, we recruited out another great player, Ronald Powell. That was the Dominic Easley year, I think number 1 class of all time in college football. So great player. He didn't. It took him a minute to get going in college football. There were a couple injuries, but awesome person. I mean, never was an issue at all. Beautiful smile. Loved to be around him. Tough as nails. He was on my. I was in charge of special teams, and he was a great player in special teams. So I don't know what happened, buddy. It's heartbreaking.
You were all kind of left stunned by that. No news coming out about what happened. And I know it's a loss to everybody who was a Gator especially, and someone like you recruited him and coached him. It's hard to see your players passing like that when you realize that you were with them when they were just 18 and 19. So R.I.P. to him and his family. All the best to him, and I know it's got to be devastating for you. talk in the defect in recording. Again, we're kind of moving around our studio right here, right now. It was important to get that on because earlier in the week we talked to Franz about this. Franz has a really good memory. He was trying to recall some things about Ronald Powell. There did seem to be some issues early on with Arnold, and they had the highest, as you will hear Urban saying every tomorrow night, highest rank of recruiting class ever in college football. Yeah, the guy could recruit. And anyway, Ronald Powell's from California. And I'm glad to hear Urban come on and talk about him, saying that he was a fine young man, a guy he liked a lot, had a beautiful smile. Urban coached him on special teams. And so it's important that when someone passes, that we get some kind of accurate information. And of course, it's hard to get when someone like that. First of all, our thoughts and prayers to the Ronald Powell family, secondly, in the Gator Nation, of course. And as we know, we get older, we realize how fragile life is and how it's important to try to portray them accurately. And really, you don't get to know the players as well as you'd like to, and because of the situation being what it is. But they have some great players. You got to remember, you talk about recruiting. I mean, really, it was. I'll send you, Allie. I thought I sent you the link. My bad. I apologize. You don't get as much information as you would like to get, and consequently, you're not able to portray them accurately. And someone who is that special, and I don't know what happened to the young man, and why he's 32 years old. My gosh, horrible, whatever it was. And the first thing your mind starts wondering, well, was it this, was it that? Because there's certain things associated with some athletes, and you just automatically assume, and that's wrong to do that. You don't want to make disparaging remarks or give inaccurate information and to disgrace the dead. It's just obviously wrong. So we'll continue to follow that, and we'll continue to look into what we can find out. Again, 32 years old is too bad for anybody. For a young man who was gifted, who had so much in life, it's really unfortunate and painful to watch. And so we'll keep you posted on what we find out there. Okay, well, it's on. We'll talk to David Moulton, who follows pro football a lot. The Jim Harbaugh sweepstakes. Should we call him that? The sweepstakes. He's going to land somewhere, and it's been underway. He's met with several people today. Next up on the tour, the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta Falcons interviewed Jim Harbaugh today for his their coaching vacancy. The team announced Harbaugh is the seventh candidate to be interviewed for that job. Arthur Smith taking his time on who he's going to pick. And Harbaugh is in the front, I guess. I don't even know. Anybody know? I don't even know how close he is to that job. Is he going to go to the pros or not? It looks like he's going to have his pick of one or two jobs at some point in time. And so I talked to Urban about him today, and he grudgingly said, and he is not a fan of Harbaugh, but he has to give him props to say they were the best team by far, however he did it. And so you have to give props to the guy, although he coached 6 games and got $3 million bonus. Pretty good work. I can't do the math on that. I'll get somebody to help me. Maybe Allie can do it. She's good at math. Let's go to the Orange and Blue room and see now if we've got her hooked up. What's going on here? She's been a busy lady. She does a lot of these podcasts, much in demand, and agrees to. Oh, look, there she is, all decked out in blue. My goodness, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little bit different situation here in my studio today, so I'm kind of out of sorts. And I had cold weather, as you did. Yep. Many people did. I've got right next to me, I got the gas stove, and it makes a hissing noise, which is not good for the microphones, as you know. So here I am. Forgive me tonight for being somewhat disheveled. And, well, you were on some broadcast. What was that?
I was getting to interview Jalen Wiggins with High Top Sports. Jalen Wiggins is our most recent commit from class of 25, defensive lineman out of Tallahassee. And he was so interesting to talk to. grown up a Gator fan, which I love to hear.
Yeah.
Dad was a Gator, grandfather was a Gator, grew up cheering for Florida. And he said he has known as long as he's played football that he wanted to be a Gator. And he talked about loving the school as a whole, talking about all of the things that it can bring to the table and, the kind of academic education he's going to get at Florida and the opportunities that it presents. And it just was so refreshing to listen to a high school kid talk about something other than, how much NIL money they're going to get.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing. I had a tease on the show tonight. How many times can you ask these questions in different ways? But I've heard this said by several people, and you have too, fans, like, how can you root for your team when you don't know who they are?
Yeah.
A lot of the players aren't on the squad yet, right. And even for that matter, some coaches. And I asked the question, is there a bit of an identity crisis in college football? And I'd say based on people I'm around, I'd say yes.
100%. I mean, I feel like you and I have had some in-depth conversations about this, and it is what has the college football that you and I know and love is because we get so invested in the personal stories and struggles of these players that we cheer for. And if right now they leave if there's a struggle, right? Like it's not, we don't even have get the time to get to know them before they've moved on to the next location.
Or they cut and run, as some people would call it.
They do, and it makes it really hard to be fanatical about any given team, right? We don't know who we're rooting for. We don't know their struggles. We don't know about what they overcame in high school or the tragedy with their grandmother or their little sister's battles with, some kind of learning disability. Like those are the stories that
There
help
are the stories. Yes, they are.
Bind us to these kids and make us passionate about what they're doing out there. And there's going to be less and less of them if this is how college football continues.
Nobody has any answers, and I hate to come on here every night and start lamenting of how bad the college football game is, because as Urban said today in the interview for tomorrow, if I can get the audio fixed on it, college football as a game had a fantastic year for the fan in terms of enjoying the game, from ratings. Now, did it necessarily go great for some schools? No, it didn't. Were there issues? Yes, there were. You see Jim Harbaugh, et cetera, they have not figured out how to handle the transfer portal or NIL. So it's a hot mess. But how long can it go on like that? Either go up or down. I wrote a column the other day saying, is this the day the music died for college football? Bottom line is probably not. Because we found it's like you can't kill it like a snake unless you cut the head off. And people are suckers for college football and sports, and they'll keep coming back. Pro football is going through the roof on the ratings. I don't know what that means. I remember it's been only 10 years ago, people were saying, well, is football in danger of being extinct because of all the head injuries? And now the numbers it's like the gladiator sport, isn't it?
Sure. I think we're, as a society, maybe a little bit softer than we were, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So I think there is this kind of mystique that comes from what they're doing, and it is very gladiator-like. But I think with college football in general, there's a market correction coming. I don't know that it's coming in the next year or the next 2 years, but what we're doing right now isn't sustainable. And I honestly think that's kind of the good news, right? Because at some point, it will balance back out. I don't think we ever return to what we were before. Pandora is out of the box, and paying players is not a bad concept, but it's just the way we're doing it. And I personally would love some sort of revenue share for them from the TV profits. It's a hard pill to swallow that these universities are going to make millions of dollars off of the TV contracts from broadcasting these games, but we're going to ask the individual fans who, have 4 kids and a mortgage and 2 car payments to pay for these athletes to come to those schools, for those schools to be able to be good. That there's something wrong with that we're saddled with the burden of making our teams good by giving money to them when these TV contracts could do it, right? And if the NCAA gets involved, there will be some sort of salary caps. There will be some end to this madness, right? Like the numbers will settle out, and that's where we need to be. That's the middle ground there.
A long time before you were ever in this world, and your daddy was not very old, there were people who said they're going to kill sports, the goose that laid the golden egg. They're going to keep raising prices, and people are going to say, I've had it, I'm out. Yeah. Well, that has gone up a zillion times since then. It hasn't stopped it yet, and maybe it never will. Yeah. But the one thing that could kill it is boredom and corruption. Corruption could also kill it. And so nobody is immune to those things. We've seen them, if you look at your history books, Rome and other empires, nobody lasts forever, right? So you think, okay, what could cause this mid-course correction to become a catastrophe? It would be those things, and it would be if they stop watching TV.
Right.
Because that's where all the money's coming from.
Right. And stop watching the TV. That's where all the stadium renovations are coming from and things like that. Downsizing. We're doing things to adapt to the fact that there are people watching this at home. For a bevy of reasons, right? But, there's so little return on investment, both financially for the people that are contributing to NIL, but also emotionally for these fans who get so invested in the lives of these players if it continues on the path that it's on. There's some common sense things that we can do to make this better. They think about what Alabama's going through at this moment. And, Alabama's rated many its teams, so I don't exactly feel bad for them. Right. But how wild is it that the transfer portal is closed, except for 2, Alabama and now Washington and Arizona, so their players can jump ship. But Alabama doesn't have the opportunity to go after guys right now that are their caliber. They don't want the Arizona players. Maybe they'll get a few Washington players because they'll be familiar with the system and whatever else. But that's not a talent upgrade on the whole. So Alabama is getting rated, and there's no opportunity for them to replace what is being lost. That's a broken system.
Well, there is, and it's called cheating. And you laugh at it, but the fact is, Urban and I were talking today about it. Remember when we first heard about NIL? What it was going to be? Never going to be used for recruiting. That was against the rules, right? Well, certainly we've seen the cases at Florida State where it was, and we know everybody did it. And that was the rationale. Well, everybody else is doing it, and to a degree I agree. But, so I don't think we ever knew what it was, understood it, the parameters of it. But if you
there are no parameters.
Exactly. Right.
There are no parameters.
Yeah. It's like putting a sucker in the hand of a baby.
Name, image, and likeness. The original intent is, I'll give you a perfect example. After they won the national title in 2006, Palm Beach Autographs came to Gainesville and had a suite at a hotel, and they offered every senior on that team a certain amount of money to come and sign posters that they would then sell in their autograph shop. You could have declared for the draft, then you were allowed to sign, or you could be a senior, so you're out of eligibility. So Eric got a couple $1,000s to go sign, 50 of these posters or whatever. His roommate Jarvis Moss got like $10,000 to go sign these things. No one that was an underclassman could sign for money. So if they could convince Tim Tebow, who was a freshman at the time, to out of the goodness of his heart sign 50 of those, then great. But they could not compensate him because it was against NCAA rules. Those are the things that NIL, he should have been able, if market value is $10,000 for him to be able to sign those, just like Jarvis Moss, pay him the $10,000, let him sign your thing. You're going to turn around and sell him for more, and it's going to, and everybody's going to walk away happy.
Capitalism.
Yes, those were the kind of things that we were thinking was going to be allowed. Or you're going to be able to do a commercial for the car dealership down the street. We're seeing less and less. We're really not seeing a lot of business partnerships. We're just seeing pay for play, which is not how it was billed.
I didn't think of it as that when I first heard about it. I thought it was like the car dealer's going to pay you $25 to come down and kick some tires, and David Moulton didn't have any idea what it was either. I thought name, image, likeness. Okay, put it David Moulton's face like it is right now there on a T-shirt. Think about that. What possibilities exist? How much money you could make? Hi, David.
Have to be a pretty big T-shirt to put this head on it. Let me tell you.
How are you, Mr. Moulton?
I'm doing all right, Allie. Good to see you.
Good to see you. How you doing?
I'm okay. What's up, buddy?
Well, I want to ask the question of you. I asked earlier in the show, and Allie came on later. If there's one thing that the old story about if your house is on fire, what would you take? What would you go and grab? Or if there's something that's a personal item, not necessarily a monetary value, but something personal to you, what would it be, and how would you deal with it if you lost it? I have a reason for asking. If you can think about that, Allie, I never did get to hear your answer. I know the picture of your kids would be first, but if it was something to do more with your work, somehow, what would it be? And you like to think that you've made a little tiny mark someplace in this world after 50 or so years, maybe a little corner of the world. I did pick up the New York Times obit today and see my quote about Norm Snead dying. I'm one of the few guys that saw him play. So my point was something happened to me that just rocked me yesterday, and it shook me up. I thought, wow, I wonder what other people would do about it. Is there something that comes to mind, Allie and David, that you would say, man, I would really, not other than jewelry and things of monetary value, what prized possession or possessions pertaining to your work would you most want to protect?
Oh my gosh, I need more than 5 seconds to wrap my head around that.
Well, David can talk fast.
David, go first. Let me think about this.
Well,
maybe the first question I've ever been asked.
From a career standpoint, I don't know. I mean, I don't have much evidence of a career, to be honest with you. My grandmother saved all the columns that I wrote for 15 years. Mm-hmm. I didn't save a one. I anchored the 11 o'clock news the night of September 11th.
Okay, that's a good one.
Maybe I would take that tape with me just to have proof that I had a career. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'd take the Emmy that's on the shelf behind me.
How about that?
But
look at that thing. Let's turn around. I hadn't seen that before. You hadn't been showing that one lately, David.
Yeah.
Where is it?
On the shelf.
Top right. What does it say on it? For what?
Monday Night Football won the Emmy last year for, I think, best live broadcast. And so everybody who was a part of it outside of the on-air talent, as we found out recently, but everyone else got an Emmy.
Not everybody, but the people who had a role in it. And you had one as, what's the title say? What is it, for what?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I'm listed as an associate producer.
Exactly. You have to be an associate producer or hired to get one. I didn't know that, and that's what mine is. And by the way, I was not, but Teddy Shaker, God bless him, put my name down as an associate producer, and so I got one. I'm thinking, how did I get this Emmy? I didn't do anything. I thought it was John Madden's Emmy at CBS. I don't know.
6 years earlier, I was a part of the same Emmy win at CBS. They didn't mail out Emmys; they mailed out plaques. So
there you go. I was shocked when I reached out and saw one. Yeah.
So I guess, Allie, if the house was on fire, I'd grab either the Emmy or the plaque. I guess. I don't know, but I don't save stuff. I was never an autograph person. I sat for a couple hours with Mickey Mantle one afternoon as he signed autographs, and at the end he offered me an autograph, and I said, no, I'd take a handshake. I'm good.
Hey, what are you thinking, dude? You can't do that.
I don't know.
My gosh.
I'm not into things. You don't get to take them with you. I'm into people.
Okay, that's good. Allie, maybe it's just tape right here that you'll always treasure. Sweet and sour shows, right?
You guys are so much more insanely accomplished in your careers than I am, and so I certainly don't have anything that can compete with an Emmy or any of the incredible things that New York Times bestseller list, that the accomplishments that you guys have. But I do have tapes from stuff that I've done, and I think maybe. So the very first TV show that I ever did was at the time it was Time Warner. It was before it became Bright House, but they had a high school sports show. And the way that you got cast for this is that they ran a radio spot that said, call this phone number to register to come audition to host our high school sports show.
Okay.
This is our first ever kid-hosted high school sports show. And it was in September of my junior year of high school. So I called the number from my car, from my cell phone that I had just got.
Oh, you had a cell phone. Wow.
I do. Well, my parents got it for me when I turned 16 because I was going to be driving. And that was,
okay.
They wanted me to know where I was. And I called and said I would like to audition. And they gave me a time slot. I didn't know at the time, but I was the very first audition of their list. And originally the plan was that you would host it for one sports season. So I was cast for football, but they did football. They did so basically they did fall, winter, and spring sports is the way that it was. So there was supposed to be three hosts for it. So I did the fall season, and it went really well, and it was really fun. It was an hour-long show once a week on Time Warner, and it was sponsored by Beef O'Brady's. It's a Beef O'Brady's high school sports show. Well, then it came time for the winter, and they said, we had this kid, but will you stay on and do it with them? So I was like, sure. So I did it by myself in the fall, but then I did it with this kid in the spring, and then or in the winter, and then it rolled around to the spring, and they're like, okay, well, we have a new kid that we picked for the spring, but will you stay on and do it with them in the spring? So I was like, sure. So I did that. And then the second year came around, my senior year, and they're like, well, we've just decided we want you to host the show for the year. So we're not going to hold auditions. Will you be willing to do it? And I said, sure, I will. And I have those tapes for that. But I think back to 16-year-old me, I, drove across the bridge to St. Pete, walked into a TV studio I'd never been in, and did something that I had never done because I love sports. And I thought it was such an opportunity to trace that dream. And it wasn't big time, right? It was Time Warner. It's such a small local television thing, but I think I would show it to my kids so that I would say, go after what you want to do. And I'm not working for ESPN sidelining Monday. A lot of fun, and learned a ton of things and met really cool, interesting people, kind of starting because of that.
That's a great story. David, what was your first assignment?
Well, I was very lucky. I went to college at the University of Scranton, and
I didn't know there was a University of Scranton. Really?
Yeah. And D3
Sorry,
school,
I didn't mean to be insulting.
No, D3 school, no football, and not a great communications program either. But I signed up for everything, and I had an internship at the CBS affiliate. And ironically, and I don't know if it's the people, but it's the folks who own Channel 20 in Gainesville bought the CBS affiliate in Scranton. And they got rid of a bunch of people. And next thing you know, they had an opening in the sports department, but they had also a hiring freeze because the paperwork hadn't gone through and all that. And so they promoted the intern. And next thing you know, I'm 20 years of age. I'm not even a senior in college, and I'm doing weekend sports in a top 50 market. I have no business being on the air, but I did it, and I guess was okay and stayed with it. Station across town hired me a year later and gave me a promotion. And, well, a 20-year mediocre TV career ensued, and along the way did some play-by-play.
Don't be
and
so
some
self-deprecating, David.
and
Come on.
what have you.
You're
So,
a pro, you know it. Well, those are
and
good
eventually
stories.
found my way to Fort Myers, Florida, to do
Yeah.
television, and then saw that the writing on the wall in the early 2000s that local TV sports is going to die. And basically ESPN has killed local TV sports, and I need to do something else. And I decided, you know what I think is going to thrive though? Sports radio.
Hey,
And And I had done it for 10 years before Fort Myers, and I thought, let's go all in on sports radio and see where it takes you.
I remember saying that one time in 1996 at a station in Ocala. Anyway, my mind is it's, everybody had to have a break somewhere. You had to think you had some kind of talent. Allie, something must have given you a little confidence that you want to go in there and you would nail that and get that job.
Allie, did you want to be a sportscaster, or was that just something that popped up and you went, that interests me? Because I wanted to be a sportscaster since I was 8 years old.
Wow.
I wanted to be a sportscaster my entire life. It just was one of those things where I thought it wouldn't happen until I graduated college, kind of thing. And so this was new and exciting. And I mean, I was the fifth grader that hosted our morning show at elementary school. I hosted our middle school morning show and our high school one. Like, I wanted any opportunity I could get. This was just the first one that that was available to me.
No, Allie, you were smitten. You were gonna be in sports. It was destined for you. Your family. I knew all those bunch of guys. They were committed people. You had to be a part of it if you were a kid, and you saw it. I had mine's a little bit less glamorous. I had a college professor that gave me a D in a course I was acing, and he said the final exam doesn't count, and I had a 94 going into. It was an open book exam, right? And I took it, and I didn't spend a lot of time because about to flunk physical sciences. I stayed up all night and studied the physical science test, and I went in and did this, open book test. And I went to look at my grade, and I went from an A to a D. And I said, I thought you said the final grade didn't count. He said, well, your paper was so poor, I couldn't give you anything. I said, I don't understand that. That's not what the rules were. I was brokenhearted, mad, angry. I quit school. I went home to Ocala. So I'm done. As much as I've hard work here, I've done this. I quit playing baseball to do better in the sport in sports writing, and he hated sports writers, by the way. So here I was at 20 years old. Went home, and the only thing I needed to do was go to the paper, and the guy who was the news editor was a former sports editor, Bernard Watts, and he remembered me. And he said, oh, yeah, I want to go. And I said, well, I want a job. I said, well, I don't have anything right now. I said, nothing in sports. He said, well, I do have this one thing. He said, we have hired a new sports editor. She will be here in about 4 months. Until she arrives, you can have this job. I took it, became acting sports editor for a woman who I once went out with, dated in high school. She was a year older, and so when she came back, she got the job. I was relegated to a proofreader's role until I said, I got to go back to college and eat crow and learn this. But I mean, it's not that glamorous, David. There has to be this burning sensation. And I still say this, the great ones I've had a chance to work with, there's something about when the story breaks or the big moment happens, it lights them up like nothing else. You just get that feeling that you're into the night you had 9/11, David, or whatever that was you had. I mean, there's something in your blood, isn't there, guys?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the stuff that I think back that I did chasing a story, I mean, standing in floodwaters in which the police were like, when this road goes, you're going to die. And I'm like, yeah, but I got to get this video. And, I pulling over, coming back from doing a sports story and seeing a house fire and pulling up to the side of the house and catching the fireman literally rescuing a child out the window, with the camera. I mean, following the police into a bingo hall in Fargo when an armed robbery was taking place. And, yes, it is a passion. You do some really stupid things because you think you're, contributing to the world in a small degree. And you realize a few years later, what the heck was I doing? Exactly. They were shooting at each other and you didn't have any guns.
Let me read this. I'm going to tell you my story because it's kind of a heartbreaker for me. And I'll tell you about some of the things I lost this past week. Titan MRI, I want to tell you about them. Worth the short drive to Gainesville. No insurance is no problem. You can pay with cash or card with same-day scheduling at Titan MRI. Could be available to you. Start feeling better today about it because Titan MRI is North Central Florida's premier independent MRI facility. Come see why hundreds of patients from our visiting communities like Gainesville around Gainesville, Ocala, Marion County, and the villages are going to Titan MRI. It's TitanMRI.com. Okay, so here's the deal. I was blessed in this regard because I'd like to bounce off of sports and do other stories that interest me. And I had bosses that would let me do that. When I was in Cape Kennedy, the moonshot. I got to go out and stand there and write about the moonshot. That was one example of something. And when I went to New York, and later my friend up there, I love stories like the funeral for Louis Armstrong, who I really loved. And I got in a car with Peggy Lee. You know that name, David? And got a chance to drive with her. She didn't talk to me. And go to the funeral that night. Those kind of moments were special to me. And I had a treasure trove full of those things that I did in my lifetime. There were not always sports stories. In fact, some of the best stories I did were non-sports stories. The day that 5 kids were killed in a bus crash in a small community up in Nyack, where I was spending the weekend working and helping out. And we put together a 2-page spread the next week on reliving those moments, those children, the day they were going to school, what they did, what they ate, and then reliving it when they got back on the bus to go back across those railroad tracks. I was very happy. I went to my boss and said, let's do something special. This story deserves it. It's our backyard. We did it, and the New York and the AP awarded us the best feature story of the year in New York State, including all the New York papers. Not bragging, but those moments were more special to me than anything else. I loved all that. I kept my clippings, almost all of the important ones. I had boxes and boxes and boxes of those clippings, and I one day wanted to make a book out of my favorite 25 columns. Yesterday, I got the word that the public storage company had sold my unit and sold all my papers. They're gone. And it's had to do with the fact that my late wife was the one in charge of paying the bill. All the communications went to her email account, phone calls, whatever, and the attempts to contact them were futile no matter how many times I tried. And I could not believe it, that everything I had that saved in print, you can't get them anymore, it's gone. Someone bought it for $600. I don't know what happened, how it happened, or how to get it back. I'm told I probably never will. So when you think about that, what defines you, what do you value? That was a big chunk of me that went out with somebody. They probably put it in the fireplace. Something like to say one man's treasure is another man's trash. So that hurt. And I was happy they pick up my email, and my friend Neil Amber, the New York Times former sports editor, wrote me a note saying, hey, buddy, the New York Times quoted you today in the Norm Snead obituary, which I wrote for Sporting News back when he was playing on the Giants. I thought, well, at least I've got that, a few paragraphs there someplace. So, again, I blame nobody but myself. I'm not sure how I could have prevented it, but I blame myself, and I really am sorry that happened. So, so anyway, that's mine. Those things are, you treasure things like that when you don't have them. You think about it, well, So if you got something you really care about, that Emmy over there, David, be sure you put it somewhere special.
I have to admit, I don't really care much about
David,
it.
what do you care about, David?
People.
Huh?
I care about people. I care about my wife, my daughter, and my mom.
Yeah.
And my granddaughter. I care about people. I don't know. I never had money growing up. I can pay the bills, but I don't have a ton of money. And besides, my understanding is you're not allowed to take it with you. So I don't treasure material things.
I read this yesterday, and I think it's really nice, especially for an old guy who's getting married this weekend. Not everyone is given the chance to grow old, so appreciate and thank God for every single day of your life. I think those are the important things. And I saw a really good thing written about the joy of being a father. Of all things, written by a guy named Jim Donnan. Now, if you know Jim Donnan, it didn't strike me as a guy who would be a well-known author, but there's some depth to that, and maybe I shouldn't judge it, or maybe he just ripped it off from somebody. So those are things that you do value. And David, by the way, you got it right, I think, in my opinion, and those things do matter. And I'd like to hope that maybe in this current state of affairs where money is everything, and dollar buys you everything you want. Those values will not be lost. David, do you think they will be?
I know the generations are different, but I don't know. I don't think Allie's different from me, and I don't think I'm different from you. And we're three generations looking at one another right now. I don't think we're that different. Or I don't know. And maybe I'm naive.
Well, maybe it's not a generational thing. I don't know either. So that's the thing about it. We don't know how the other generation thinks. So, all right, just a quick moment here. By the way, fill me in on this information. You had an interview with a new Gator today, and apparently the Gators have got this 4-star defensive lineman on their radar again. Have you heard about Allie? Signed with Texas, but now has been released and back on the market. And DeAndre Robinson, who is he? Defensive lineman.
Robinson, he honestly, he is a kid that when he was going to make his commitment, I had talked to his mom, and she had promised me I could interview him the second he announced for Florida. And I had asked, can we do a pre-record? And as soon as, his commitment goes live, then we'll run the video or whatever. And she was like, well, let's jump on as soon as he announces for Florida. And he had told the NIL powers that be he would be a Gator. He had told the coaching staff he would be a Gator. And so it was honestly very shocking when the Texas hat is what he picked up, because that's not what he had led anybody to believe was going to be happening. So I don't know what happened that made him flip at the last second to Texas. My assumption is it's money related, but I don't know that for a fact. And I also don't know what is causing the request to get out of his letter of his signed letter of intent. Like that's a bizarre thing to me too. You just signed in December. We're talking about a month since he asked, out. Now that he's asked out, I don't know what he didn't like or what changed or whatever, but I do know that he really felt strongly about Florida. And at the very least, it was very neck and neck until the end. So, and we need help, right? Like, we will take a defensive lineman for sure. This was a guy we wanted, and this is where we've talked about this, Betty, but where building those relationships in recruiting matters, because being the second hat on the table has some value at this point in time where we are in college football. You maintained that relationship. And so if something goes sour with your first choice, you want to be available and ready and waiting, and to have not burned that bridge, because they may come right back to you. I don't think anybody thought it would only take a month, but we maintain that relationship, and that's a good thing.
Allie, can I ask you, do you think, we talked for months and months as to how important this offseason, and now this offseason's a few weeks old. It seems longer, but it's only a few weeks old. Have the Gators done enough? Have the Gators had a good enough offseason?
No, not so far. I think there's some opportunity that is going to be coming up in the next little bit of time where my answer could change. We get Robinson in. I think there's a great chance we get Jamar Grimsley, who he's from Tampa. He's Tampa Catholic, my high school, committed to Alabama. I don't believe he's officially been released, but I think he has asked out of his letter of intent as well. Florida was a number 2 there, and I know that they had maintained the relationship right up until he went and signed. So, we could get him. We land Robinson and Grimsley, and we're back in the top 10 recruiting wise. Now, transfer portal talent wise, I think if you look at the guys that left and look at the guys that we brought in, I don't think you can say we got better. And that's kind of scary, because we have to be better for 2024 for these recruits that we signed to matter, right? Like, if we can do backflips all day if we end up somehow in the top 10 for our 2024 signing class. But the reality is we'll probably see 2 or 3 of them on the field the whole year. That's not the way that it works. We need these experienced transfer portal kids to come in and make a difference right away to buy Napier 2025.
Yeah. I hate to sound like the same old Johnny One Note, and I asked this question last night, and I truly don't know the answer to it, and I wish I did. The feelings you get about things sometimes, just the mood. David, we've talked about this for 2 years. It's a mood you get about a team and how you think they feel and look, and it's a gut feeling a lot of times, and not so much factual, which is where fans get in trouble. They begin to get inflated ideas. But, does it feel like to you, and I've tried to ask this question of other people, that when it comes to making changes, and I mentioned this to Urban today on the show, that Florida is just a tick behind. And I give an example of the coach at Tulane. You guys hear about this guy at Tulane who signed all of a sudden in a matter of 10 days after getting a 5-star quarterback? He got 3 more 5-star players and, killed it out in Tulane. Tulane now, okay? Now, I know it's a private school. They got money. But this guy figured out a way to get players in the house. It's one of those grass looks greener deals. They're doing better than us, but their grass looks better. Is it just that envy, or does it feel, David, to you like Florida has been a little slower uptake in terms of the portal, in terms of whatever, even the NIL deal? What's it feel like?
Allie can, I think support this even more. I just think Billy's too deliberate, okay, in a non-deliberate world. Mm-hmm. Look what's happened at Alabama. Has it been a week? Has it been a week since the news broke that Nick Saban was retiring? It was a week ago today, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sounds right.
They've lost 22 guys. That's who were on the roster. Never mind the half a dozen commits who were coming in who went, no, I ain't coming now. Nick's not there? No, I'm out of here. So think about that. That's in a week. That's how quickly this world moves. Arizona's lost half of a recruiting class because their coach left. Washington's had a dozen people leave because their guy left. That's how quickly the world is right now. And I don't think Billy Napier is a quick mover. I think he's a battleship. He's slow, steady. He will turn. He will eventually get going in the right direction. He'll be in the seas. He'll eventually. I don't know if we're in a battleship world in college sports.
When you said he's too deliberate, I think that's it. Like, he's so afraid of making a mistake. Everything the pros and cons have to be weighed. It has to be so calculated. But by the time you do the market research, so to speak, you've missed the window. It's closed. Somebody else has offered and jumped. And, if we let a transfer portal kid leave campus without a commitment, we've lost more than likely. Right? Because they're going to get on a plane and go to a different visit, and that school won't let them leave without a commitment. And we're not in a position that we can afford to lose. We have to win these transfer portal battles. And I think that there's a lot of factors to it. I do think that NIL is part of it. On social media today, I've had lots of conversations about NIL. I, for the life of me, do not understand why our administration at the University of Florida is not publicly pushing NIL until they're blue in the face. They cannot pay it themselves, but Scott Strickland can sure as heck get in front of a camera and say, if you want Florida to win as quickly as possible, you'll join us through Florida Victorious. Here's the link. Here's how you can get involved. He can say things like, I challenge 50,000 Gator fans to sign up for $5 a month. There are things. Billy Napier, he shouldn't leave the house without a Florida Victorious polo on. Just become a billboard. This is the moment that we are in college football. We don't have to like it, but we have to face it if we want to win.
And it's no longer NIL, it's pay for play. And, buddy, as I was signing on, I think you lumped me in about, thinking that it wasn't going to be pay for play. Buddy, it's always been pay for play. It's been pay for play going back to the 70s. It just was in a brown paper bag, and it was done discreetly through, people whose names you could never find out. Now it's out in the open, and it's not NIL. It is flat pay for play. And, Allie, we were saying this 2 months ago. First off, I thought Scott Strickland 2 months ago needed to be saying, listen, you guys need Billy Napier to succeed. Okay. You want the Florida football program to succeed. Take my name out of it. Take his name out of it. If you're the Gators that you think you are, then you need to support Gator football. Pretend we're not here. Get rid of us in a year. It's still going to be the Gator football program. Are you going to starve it until you get rid of us? Okay. And the one other thing, this 5-star quarterback, what if he's really married to Billy Napier? Which all indications are right, Allie, he is. Well, then he might be the best thing about this football program 12 months from now. You going to throw Billy Napier into the creek? Because then the 5-star quarterback goes to his number 2 choice. Mm-hmm. Right. So once again, forget Billy Napier, forget Scott Strickland. If you're a proud Gator, support the Gators.
Mm-hmm.
Make you a pitchman. Pretty good, David.
But what Allie
no, you're
and I
right. I agree with you. I agree with you.
Why can't they articulate this?
Yeah.
Scott Strickland should have been doubling and tripling down on this.
Well, that's a good question. And by the way, if I implied that you weren't aware of the fact it was play for pay, I'm sorry. What I meant to say was I didn't think any of us understood the extent of it when it started 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't know it would be this big of a factor and this much money that you could, in fact, buy players.
We're talking about an organization that just 10 years ago regulated cream cheese. So I would have thought there would have been some guidance here, and there's not.
Yeah. I was talking to Spurrier the other day, and we were chatting, and I asked him about what was wrong with football, and he said, well, this or that. And, and he said, the biggest thing was, he said, says their leadership didn't do very well. He said, oh, wait a minute, they don't have any. And that's it.
And there's a chance, first off, so much stuff is happening that there really is still a chance to come up with some sort of, I don't know if it's a plan, but kind of guidelines that this is how we're going to go forward in the sport. But if you think about it, what's happening now is unfair to Washington, Arizona, and Alabama because they can't replace the kids who can get up and leave. That's it. Yeah. They're tied in. So their coach retires, their coach leaves, and they're screwed beyond belief. Well, that's not quite right. That the whole country can pick apart their roster and they can't replace any of them.
Well, the crazy thing is it's going to cause more and more of them to jump into the portal because the guys that stay are staying on a decimated team. So they have the option of, do I just get in the portal myself and get off the stinking ship, or do I go down with the ship? Which is what, Alabama's turning into a 6-6 team right in front of our very eyes. And it's one can only hope. It's crazy to watch, but I think the other ramification of this is that we're going to see coaches let go earlier and earlier because you don't want to be the last guy who loses their head coach. You don't want to be Arizona, which is where they are right now. And, the bleeding stops whenever an assistant is hired as a head coach, because then that program he's taken from does not get their players to be able to jump into the portal because it was just an assistant coach instead of a head coach. But right now, the bleeding, Alabama's bleeding, Washington's bleeding, Arizona's bleeding. So what they're going to do is cut their losses way earlier so that they have time to replace guys leaving in the portal.
How about this for irony? So Alabama gets a spot in the playoff. What if they had been denied the spot in the playoff? Does Nick announce his retirement in mid-December? And does Alabama hire his replacement, who probably wouldn't be the coach at Washington because he's getting ready for a national semifinal? But does Alabama replace him then before the bowl game? and Nick goes and coaches in whatever, the Orange Bowl or whatever his final game is, and they ride off into the sunset. But Alabama's got a new coach in place before early signing period, before the transfer portal opens up. And the likelihood is that Alabama doesn't lose the 30 guys that they've now lost.
Yeah.
Great point.
All
Great point.
because they got a spot in the playoff. They probably would have lost a dozen, but they wouldn't have lost 30.
Bleeding wouldn't be what it is now. I also find ironic about all of this is that Florida State has taken a dozen Alabama backups and are now saying that all those guys are going to start for them. Yet they also argued for the playoffs that they were actually the better team than Alabama. So I'm not sure that both of those
talking out both sides of your mouth, that's called. Now, let me give you guys just one to close on. I know we've had some mysterious moves on coaches, people leaving, coming, going with, and like players. Were you surprised at all, and what does it mean, if you can mean anything, that Corey Raymond now is returning to LSU with Brian Kelly, a guy that I guess he didn't want to keep when he came in there. And he spent 10 years at LSU. He was the architect of DBU, and now all of a sudden he's back. I always thought he was a terrific coach. I always liked him, and yet there was something broken about that defense when he was there. David, you said no. Why?
No, because it's job security. I mean, I'm sorry. If you're an assistant right now at Florida, you're thinking I'm out of work Christmas. No, I go to LSU. Brian Kelly's not going anywhere. We're fine. I've got a job for at least 3 years, maybe longer. No, I think it's all, security. If I was him, I would have left too.
Well,
quite frankly, what do we think the odds are right now that Corey Raymond and that staff is on the Florida payroll a year from now? I mean,
well, he wouldn't have been.
Corey Raymond got fired, so
right, but
so he wouldn't have been on the payroll. I mean, if you're saying if Napier is there, odds are the staff is not there. If I'm a betting person, I'm not betting that this staff is there past probably November 2nd of next year. I hope I'm wrong, but if I'm a betting person, but I think it says a couple things about Corey Raymond. Like, first of all, I don't believe that Corey Raymond just forgot how to coach. And so I don't know what was going on, but I just have a hard time blaming it on Corey Raymond. The other thing it tells me is that Corey Raymond does not have a very large ego, because Corey Raymond was let go by Brian Kelly when Brian Kelly came in, and then was willing to go back, a year later. So that tells me that he is a decently humble guy. That's not an easy thing to walk back into after he told you he didn't want you the first time around. But I would assume that it had be very difficult to be a very seasoned coach having to take orders from a 30-year-old. And that is not a knock on Austin Armstrong's coaching ability. I just think that was probably a different and uncomfortable position for Corey Raymond to be put in. And I think that there is a possibility that the discussion was just, hey, we think Austin Armstrong's the future. We want to give him a shot. We've got to get some guys in here that we think maybe can work better with him. And this is not based on any inside information. I don't know that.
I agree 100% what you said. This feels the same way to me. Exactly. And there is an age gap, and it has come out, and he's looking at the guy saying, this kid was in diapers when I was, coaching ball, and what does he know? I don't know. And I'm taking orders from a guy that has no experience, I mean, yeah, I can understand that happening. David, how about you?
Well, also, quite frankly, we don't know how good he is. I mean, we've yet to see it.
Armstrong, you mean?
Yeah. I know he's, thought of highly, got potential.
I have no idea.
Haven't really seen the results.
To that end, though, I do think Napier made the best offseason move he could make by hiring the defensive coordinator at Auburn, who was Austin Armstrong's mentor beforehand, because I don't know of another scenario where you can get a really seasoned coach to come in and work either with or for a 30-year-old guy, unless you're bringing in the guy that built him. Because there is some pride that is going to go into, I groomed this. I helped create him. I helped, and an ability to continue the mentoring relationship. And, needing to bring the mentor in is probably an admission to some extent that maybe he wasn't ready for the role he was put in. But at the very least, it's a nice course correction, and a way to get experience in there without the risk of headbutting, essentially.
And let's face it, it's tough for Billy to recruit coaches. He's at a disadvantage because he's seen, as 2024 as a win or else. If you've got other possibilities, you pursue those and you call Billy back last.
Right.
Well, you talk about the defensive executive. What is it called? Executive coach or whatever. Some executive title in there. And I don't know. I don't mean to sound snarky about this because I know some awful good coaches that come from small schools. And Spurrier, let's face it, had a whole staff of Dukies there. People thought, well, you get too many of those. But this guy is also from Louisiana. I mean, there's anybody that you can coach that's not from Louisiana? I just wondered.
Chance on him, after that. And there is, I think he has some pedigree there. And he was apparently an incredible recruiter. He is at least partially responsible for the two guys that they flipped directly from Florida, which I find that ironic that now Auburn's, defensive staff is kind of decimated after they stole recruits from us.
Yeah.
But it's such a hard situation for Billy to hire those coaches. If you want to get a young, excited guy willing to work under Austin Armstrong, your options are probably from smaller schools, somebody who's willing to make the move for a year as a resume builder and is okay if it doesn't work out after a year because they got to add that line to the resume. But if you're talking about a young guy, but that is established, who probably has a young family with kids in school and stuff, do you upset the apple cart, move all of them for what potentially is 1 year? That would be a hard sell as a mom of 4 kids, 9 and 4. That would be a difficult sell for me. And so I can imagine that would be the case for coaches too.
I have to admit, buddy, I'm a little biased, and maybe it's because I've always been a career minor leaguer. I've always thought that there were very talented people that were in the minors that for whatever reason didn't get the opportunity. I mean, Chip Kelly spent 12 years at New Hampshire before he was basically discovered. And then 5 years later, he was literally changing college football schematically. Alabama just talked the guys who were the head coaches at Buffalo and South Alabama to leave their jobs to be assistants at Alabama. I think there can be very talented people that are toiling, maybe not in the bright lights in the big city. So I'm not going to hold it against somebody because they come from the minors. But that's from a guy who spent 35 years working in the minors. So.
Well, I mean, look, I get it, and I have gone through some of that stuff myself when I was at the New York Daily News, and Dick Young used to walk around saying, I hired all these Florida guys. We're all these guys from the Florida State League around here. That was his big thing about us. So I get that. It wasn't so much about the fact that they coached at a smaller school. It was the same school. They've gotten a bunch of coaches from the same school. Maybe they're great coaches,
but buddy, a lot of people hire A, who they know, and B, I'm telling you, I don't think he had it. He didn't have the choices this offseason that 100 other Division I head coaches had. I mean, I'm sorry, the whole world knows he's on the hot seat and he's up against it. He's playing the hardest schedule in the country next year.
And if you're in the foxhole, who do you want with you when his back is up against the wall?
That showing you trust.
Yes, and I think that is part of it.
And I get that. I get it.
Hey, please come here, help me out. I know you have what it takes to help us get over this hump. We get bowl eligible. We've bought ourselves more time. Help me do this. Help Austin do this. And I'm sure that was part of the pitch. And hopefully they accomplish it, right? Like I honestly, I love this particular hire. I think it just makes sense for the moment. Super disappointed we've heard nothing about special teams. Interesting that we reportedly had conversations with Charlie Weiss Jr. because I did honestly believe that the OC pipe dream was dead. And I call it a pipe dream because I really wanted one. But the fact that he had conversations with Charlie Weiss, and obviously, he's got a great situation going. It would be silly for him career-wise to jump to Florida.
Willie Corn, you don't think Willie Corn can do it?
I think Billy is going to want something very specific, and it seems to me that I guess he doesn't think that Willie Korn is
He
it.
wants a
You know what's
quarterback coach. Yeah,
you know
well,
what's
offensive coordinator.
you know what's a little disappointing to me is, when Nick retired, Tommy Reese is one of those that was going to lose his job. Well, Billy supposedly has a relationship with Nick. Now I know Nick's got a better relationship with Kirby, so he was just looking for a soft landing spot for Tommy Reese for a year before Tommy could pick his next location. Well, Tommy Reese on paper may be the co-offensive coordinator at Georgia. He ain't going to be the offensive coordinator at Georgia. Okay. I mean, that's just to give him a title and to give him a paycheck. Well, Florida could have made him offensive coordinator. He could have been the offensive coordinator at Florida. And I mean,
Well,
Tommy
Mike
Reese
Bobo's
year,
locked into that job forever.
well, but that's what I'm saying. That to me, this is an opportunity where, Tommy Reese was available. When Nick's retiring, you make the phone call and you go, Nick, what's going to happen with Tommy? I need an OC.
Yep.
Could be. Hey, guys, great stuff. I love that we're still talking past the time because it means we have interesting conversations because of the two people over there doing it. David Baldo says, by the way, smash the subscribe button. Please do that. Also, go check out Alec's show, A Peek Inside the Gators, and David Moulton's show, Miller and Moulton, now on everywhere in America. Soon to come to Gainesville, right, David?
Apparently, it would take an act of Congress.
David, two separate people message me on Instagram and ask me why your show's not available in Gainesville.
There you go.
And you can tell them the University of Florida because they're the roadblock.
Been there, done that, David, over the years.
Yep.
Many times.
Yep. You guys get ESPN National in the morning instead of Miller and Moulton. Complain to the University of Florida.
Well, that's it. That's what it's like. Hey, guys, great job tonight. Always love having you on. May not be back next week, but I'll let you know. I have a little thing to take care of.
You better not be. For goodness sakes, get married. Go have a life for a week, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, we'll see what goes there. But, yeah, thank you, David, and appreciate your support, both of you. And you guys are terrific to work with. I appreciate it very much. Continued success on both your shows. One of these days, maybe I'll be big enough to be on the Alec's podcast. I'm waiting for that invitation. I haven't made it yet.
Well, you're off season. It's on for sure.
Okay. Thank you, Alec. Thank you, David. Have a good evening. See you in a few days.
Good night,
all right,
everyone.
Hey, congratulations, buddy.
Thank you, buddy. Alec. Thank you, David, very much. Appreciate that. Be well, my friends. Talk to you soon.
Have a good night.
All right, folks. Thank you for listening and watching. I want to be sure and say thank you to our sponsors tonight. Again, they make this thing work. And for you for subscribing to this program. Our sponsors, of course, Meldon Law. They've been with us a long time. If you have a question about your lawsuit and want a second opinion, call them. Get in touch with them. Also, Titan MRI. Terrific deals for MRIs. If you've been through it, how hard it is to get one appointment right away, and you can't get in. You wait in line. Titan MRI streamline all of that. And a lot of people are going up there from various communities, including the Villages, Ocala, etc., to Gainesville, and finding a better price, a better deal for you in Titan MRI. And, of course, my special friends here in Ocala, and I will be back in Ocala next week, by the way, for a while. And that's my friends at Administrar Medical Research, who not only represent my community well, also friends, been supporters of our show for a long, long time. And we appreciate that. They also look after our health. They have a high-quality, patient-centered medical research facility right there in Ocala. They bring cutting-edge clinical trials to Ocala in areas like Alzheimer's, dementia, osteoarthritis, psoriasis, migraine headaches, etc. Continue to do the research on those things so we can get better treatment for it. The information they get will be sent off to big pharmaceutical and biomedical companies to get better medications for you. If you'd like to be a part of this, they've been doing it since 1998, you can go to renstar.net and you might be able to be involved in the clinical research and talk to the people there. In some cases, time and travel are compensated for. Meanwhile, they're a good neighbor, they're a good steward, and they're a good company. Renstar Medical Research, seeking tomorrow's answers to the health questions of today. Thank you, folks. We'll be back hopefully tomorrow night with our Urban Meyer interview, and then we'll see you in a few days. It's the big wedding this weekend. Appreciate all your comments, all your thoughts, and I hope we have good things to talk about in the near future. Certainly like to see Florida football back, wouldn't you? Yeah, I think we'd all like to see that. It's about time. We get tired of these negative shows. We had so much fun talking about what it's going to be like, and here it is. And if we seem glum about it, well, that can change. Hopefully it will. Have a great night. Have a great week, folks.